Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Standard H podcast, a casual conversation about the lives of entrepreneurs and those growing companies. This podcast has been a wonderful supplement to my apparel brand, Standard H, which serves up elevated casual automotive and travel-inspired apparel and accessories to you discerning car and watch lovers. It's been a blast recording these episodes, and if you like what you hear, please visit standard-h.com and sign up for our email list. Our recently revamped website not only hosts every episode of this show, but also allows you to explore the entire product assortment and our latest travel recommendations. As an email subscriber, you will then receive offers no one else is privy to, and I can promise it'll be well worth your while. Just hit pause real quick and hop over to standard-h.com to sign up. We'll be here waiting for you to hit play when you return. Watch collecting is often described as a journey, and along these roads of exploration, you may encounter independently owned brands you've never heard of creating some of the most incredible timepieces. If you're in search of these brands, look no further than Passion Fine Jewelry, owned by former Standard H podcast guest Tim Jackson. Offering incredible timepieces as well as phenomenal customer service, Passion Fine Jewelry is California's largest independent watch dealer located right here in Solana Beach, just north of San Diego. There you will find Roger Smith, Gronfeld, Kudoke, Habring, Sarpaneva, Roman Gauthier, and many more. If you can't make it to California, visit passionfinejewelry.com for their entire offering online. This episode is also brought to you by Cantonment. Cantonment's flagship product, the kerchief, is a perfect medium between a handkerchief and a bandana. Featuring iconic designs such as a Fender Stratocaster and the dashboard of a Volkswagen GTI, these utilitarian cloths are an item that should be a mainstay in your everyday carry. Tuck one in a back pocket or use one as a neckerchief. Visit them at Cantonment Co., that's CANTONMENT.co, and use the code STANDARDH in all caps, no spaces, for 20% off their entire online shop. Now let's get to the show. Jonathan Segal is someone I've wanted to interview for years. When Standard H launched, I had called his firm to see if they would mind me hosting an image of theirs on my website, as the home served as an inspiration to the brand. They politely agreed, and even though the website no longer hosts that image, this conversation will be present instead. Jonathan has designed some of the most recognizable buildings in and around San Diego. Primarily characterized as brutalist architecture, his buildings' facades clad in concrete often house people as well as businesses. Labeled as mixed use, the approach has been quite popular over the last couple of decades. However, not many are as aesthetically pleasing to me as Jonathan's creations. A funny thing about Jonathan is there may be several of you listening who already know of him for an entirely different reason, and that's his incredible car collection. He is shown at the Quail and has won several awards over the years. When we recorded this conversation, he had driven a 73 911 RS in Chartreuse to work, which looks incredible, so you'll have to check out the Instagram post for photos. Needless to say, we dive into architecture, his cars, and even talk watches. I really love the analogy Jonathan comes up with comparing buildings to blue jeans, so let's just get into it. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time. It's kind of been a long time coming, and a previous iteration of my website involved a blog with written interviews, which we never got to, but it also hosted a photo of your house, the Cresta, in La Jolla, which is one of my favorite builds.
Thank you. Sorely missed that one.
Yeah. So I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. We usually start with a little bit of background. Who's Jonathan in high school?
He's a guy that barely got out of high school, but had a track scholarship that got me out to high school, got me to college.
Oh, where'd you go?
University of Idaho. That's the Harvard of the West.
What is your event?
I was a hurdler. My dad was a Olympic bronze medalist in 1960 in Rome. He was a 100 and 200 meter runner. He was,
no kidding.
Number 5 in the world.
That's incredible.
Pretty crazy. Yeah, I was not that guy. I was fortunate to get out to, get out of Manhattan Beach and get up to Idaho and then come back to San Diego in 3.
Okay, so where were you born then?
Greenville, South Carolina. Both my parents were English.
No kidding.
So they emigrated over to the United States. He went to school at Furman University and then graduated and then did his deal and moved all over the country and ended up in Manhattan Beach for high school.
What was sort of the music choice in high school? What was coming through the speakers?
Supertramp.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just watching. There was a documentary on Davis, not Clive Davis. Clive Davis, yeah, last night. It was amazing to see all the genres he went through. But
Sure.
yeah, Supertramp. There was Aerosmith. There was Kiss. There was Cheap Trick. Genesis.
Yeah, Phil Collins. Yeah.
Phil Collins. That was before Phil Collins, though.
Okay.
Actually, Phil Collins had just. That's right. In '76, he had broken out, and it was Peter Gabriel broken out. Phil Collins was still with Genesis.
See, I'm a '80s baby, so Invisible Touch is like one of the first albums I recall ever hearing.
Yeah, Peter Gabriel's pretty incredible.
Oh,
That
yeah.
guy he was like the John Lennon of the Beatles. You know, McCartney had the tunes. Yeah.
So what inspired you to get into architecture to begin with?
You know, I sort of floundered through high school and got up to school and then, you know, as a good Jewish boy, you're either a doctor or an attorney. That was back to Clive Davis too, by the way. And we had to take a chemistry pre-entrance exam to see if you have enough chemistry to get into the chemistry class. And that didn't pass that, so therefore I had to do pre-chemistry. It's like, no, I'm not going to do this. And then in the fraternity I was going to, I built a little loft, and for some reason, I can't tell you exactly what, I decided to go into architecture. My whole world, my whole life has been serendipity.
Wow.
Really crazy. Just like stuff happens.
So did University of, you said Idaho?
Idaho, yeah.
Did that have an architecture school?
Yeah, fantastic one actually. It was like at a perfect storm. We had a lot of people that were community college transfers from Southern California coming up to University of Idaho. My class had 5 people that were, you know, national level designers that came out of our school. It was a pretty amazing year. Really amazing year.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. So then how did you, what was your first job then out of school?
So I, you know, again, lived in Manhattan Beach, so I come back in the summer times and I worked for a firm, Charles Kober I worked for, who was like the #1 national shopping center designer. And then Coy Howard, who was one of the top architects in the nation for just design.
Right.
In Venice Beach, so we worked on the ocean. Fake Jimi Hendrix would come by with his skates and his pack and his guitar, and it was just crazy times.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Wow, that's incredible.
Lived in Venice Beach when the shots went off all night. Oh yeah, it was pretty much Crazyville over there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then came down here, San Diego, the last summer. I worked for kind of a B architect, just because the recession was on and I needed a job. And then came back after college was over and worked for a guy named Homer Dellowey. And he was in the 50s, one of the top 3 architects. And commonly what happens in architecture is you do a couple great pieces of work and then all of a sudden you're now the rainmaker talking to the clients. You're no longer the designer, and then you get your designer. So if you have sort of great designers that come up, your work continues to get better. And if you have B designers, your work starts to falter and you just become a rainmaker and a glad hander, and you're no longer the designer. It's kind of a tragic irony in architecture how that can happen.
So when you were working with him, was he primarily residential or commercial?
He was commercial. He did the police building downtown when I was with him, which is probably one of the not so good buildings in downtown San Diego.
Right.
But for the time, downtown was just a hood.
Right.
And they consumed a super block downtown because there's an earthquake fault that ran through it. We had to move the building out of the middle to the side.
Oh, wow. So what was the impetus behind striking out on your own?
Homer was a great man. He was a businessman too, and he said, "Hey, you should move downtown." Go great. They're building some condos called Park Row, and this was like maybe 6 months into working for him. And I said, "Well, we don't have the 20% down. We save money. My wife and I saved like 10 grand in 6 months." And Homer said, "Here, I'll go halvesies with you." So we went halvesies on the unit. He never signed a document. It was really weird. He never signed an agreement. It was all handshake for him, and I got an agreement written up. Then the stress level was too high, so I moved out of his office, and he freaked out. I paid him like a 10% return with no documentation, saying that, and paid him off, sold one of my cars that I started collecting, and moved downtown. And then I was on CCDC's residence board because there were only a few residents there. Right. And I met a guy named Charles Tyson. And I said, hey, I want to show you my thesis. And he said, no, you don't want to do that. You want to be a developer. Buy this piece of land. So I bought a piece of land at Kettner and G, and then started my development world.
Got it. Can you describe your business? Because you are design build, right?
No, we are architects that develop. Design build's a different deal. So if you came to a design build architect as a client, the architect would draw the house and then go build it for you. That's not what we do. We don't have any clients. We have no interest in fee architecture. We find a piece of property, we work out the parts. Since 2000, we've had no investors. So we do our own development, our own money, build the building without a general contractor. And then we have a management arm inside of our company of 3 people that then lease up the stuff. Then we manage it and take care of it.
Got it. So then you find the tenants, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, we do for rent housing. We don't do for sale. And the tenants come to us because it's apartments.
Right.
As far as the commercial aspect, we tend to try and lease that out ourselves also. I mean, we're a very efficient machine. We don't have like a job shack that's got 10 guys in it making paperwork to bog down everybody else. We're 1 or 2 guys in the job shack, and we're on the site, and we're trying to get buildings built.
Yeah, super lean. So what kind of drew you to this sort of mixed use space, or was it any advantage that stuck out in particular, or is it just something you're drawn to? Or?
Again, my whole life's been serendipity, so it's not like I planned anything. It just sort of evolves and happens.
Okay.
We typically were doing in the beginning, we're doing for sale housing, condos, bad word, lawsuit. We didn't never get sued, fortunately. And then let's see, I'm going to say the 4th or 5th project we did, it started requiring a commercial aspect to it. And it's super important that, your commercial aspect doesn't have a 7-Eleven in it, or a bank or an ATM or a Quickie Mart or a t-shirt shop. It has something that's active, that creates a soul of your building, basically. And we've been very fortunate that the commercial elements in our buildings have been wonderful. Restaurants, coffee shops, other elements that activate and enhance the building and its persona.
Sure. How do you go about finding the crews to work with as far as the actual build goes?
It changes. We try to keep the contractors that we've been working with, and we try to build 1 building a year. So over like the 32 years we've been doing this, we built 32 buildings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And a couple times we've had 2 buildings going at once, not fun, maybe 3. And then for the last 2 years, we haven't built anything, which has been actually probably pretty positive for us.
Right.
Because the cost of things are going crazy, and you can't get people, and you got a building that's going on, and you can't get any doors. So if you can't get any doors, you can't finish the drywall. If you can't finish the drywall, those guys go away. If those guys go away, it's getting them back. It's just this crazy vicious cycle of you need to get this kind of momentum going. In the last 2 buildings we built 3 years ago, we had some concrete guys that were just interesting to say the least, promising they'll do this and actually doing that, and it wasn't positive.
Sure. Your son Matt works with you. Did you recruit him, or did he approach you?
Matthew went to Francis Parker, and then he had like a 3.4 and a very high SAT, like 13 or 1400 or something. And I remember his administrator that was supposed to help us, the counselor, oh, you're never going to go to a tier 1 college. You'll go to a tier 2 or a B college. I looked at this guy and I said, I couldn't believe this. You're supposed to be inspiring these guys. And Matthew took that, he wasn't real happy about that.
Right.
And then he said, I want to be an attorney. I go, well, great. If you're going to be an attorney, I'm not paying for college. You're on your own there. And for some reason, he just decided to be an architect.
Wow.
And he went, applied for USC, and I don't believe that I had any influence whatsoever in getting in. He had a really beautiful portfolio of stuff he had done, and great grades and a great school. And he went to SC, graduated in 5 years, and came back, and he's been with me and, really making magic. And we work well together. Everybody has their moments, but we have very few unpleasant moments, shall we say.
Right.
And he's embraced and enhanced what we do.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
It often takes years to find one's style. How did you go about, because you definitely have a style would you call it brutalist, or how do you describe it?
Okay, so correct on your statement, thank you. We do have a language. Our architecture has a language, which is a combination of quite a few influences. The brutal is actually a French word meaning concrete. So when you think brutal, you think, tough. That's what I always thought it was. Concrete's kind of tough. And some of the 70s and 60s work was brutal, not brutal, which is the French one, but brutal and ugly and not really great. I think our work is sublime and pretty and beautiful, and has a real contrast of two things. That's the masculine and the feminine.
Sure.
So the masculine would be the concrete, but we create the structure in a very feminine way that is thin and pretty and graceful. So we like to build out of concrete. It affords us to do certain things in a language manner that you can't do out of plaster and steel. So for instance, if you want a long, thin cantilever, you can do it in concrete, but you can't do it out of wood. It becomes much thicker and heavier, which leads you to a sort of a different language.
Sure.
What our language is made of, 3 or 4 components: plaster, white, windows, black and clear, and then concrete. And that's been the language we've dealt with, and it's worked. It's worked well for us.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I obviously love your buildings. They're unmistakable here in the San Diego landscape, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Potentially a silly question. What are the not so obvious differences in design process and overall approach that exists between something that's, say, 4 or 5 stories and then something that's like 20?
Well, the 4 and 5 story building may not lend itself to concrete because the dollar efficiencies aren't there. So for instance, the building we're in now, which is the North Parker, has a concrete base and then has 2 stories of plaster on top. Could we have done it out of concrete? Yeah, it would have been as good, maybe not. But as you go higher, the way you get there is through concrete. But like the Cresta house that you referred to, that needed to be concrete to do what we wanted. It was next to the ocean, so it needed that for longevity. It's brutal, the atmosphere there is. So we just like the concrete. It's more expensive. So when day's over, the margins are less, but it doesn't matter to us because everything we do is about the architecture.
Right.
And the dollars follow. It's not the dollars leading the architecture. It's never been that way, and it never will be.
Yeah, that's kind of my approach to apparel is build it to last, right?
Mm-hmm.
And less is better on a certain playing field. But are there any other architects still working today that you admire?
Oh, there's quite a few that I admire.
Anyone come to mind quickly?
Well, what do you admire him for? David Baker does high-density housing up in San Francisco. His architecture is great, but his language and his story is brilliant. Tom Kundig is doing beautiful architecture up in Seattle. Yeah. Anne Fougeron's doing wonderful architecture in San Francisco. Dave Jamieson is doing magic work back east. There's people all over Lake Flato. There doesn't seem to be a significant amount of great urban high-density housing. The languages you referred to is pretty bad, and you can see it everywhere. It's almost like a pair of blue jeans that everybody can wear in any city, right?
Right.
Like why? You need shorts in some cities and thicker pants in other cities, and so they should be catering to that. So if it's cold in Seattle, you want long pants that are thick, and if it's hot in Miami, you want shorts that are nice and thin.
Right.
And everybody's got the same blue jeans in both cities.
Right.
So it's an interesting analogy, but
yeah,
it's just bad. I mean, it's like I was talking. David Jamieson actually showed up the other day. He was going to the Golden Door, and And I said, look at this stuff. It's horrible. He says, dude, it's horrible in every city. In Europe, in the United States. It's just the way it's been forever. And I think back to like the 20s when, were there bad buildings built? I've never seen a bad 20s and teens building, right?
Right.
Turn of the century.
Well, it's like designing cars, right? Because like they used to look distinguished, and now they're all. I mean, because there's so many regulations. So I mean,
Right.
that's a whole other conversation about fuel economy and aerodynamics and yada yada yada. But so architecturally, do you think that's a byproduct of chasing margin?
I wish I had the answer because I've asked many people the same question. But if you go into, small town, anywhere in the United States, it could be Boston small town or it could be Des Moines, Iowa small town. You look at the stuff that was built from like the 1880s through the 20s, and it's beautiful stuff.
Right.
So it's not a kit of parts. It's not a Sears house. It's a beautiful building, and I don't know where that level of sophistication came from. And it's all about proportion and grace and ceiling heights, and maybe because it was all about not having air conditioning systems. Maybe it was all about not having daylight, a window, electric lights. It's just really interesting. And you look at a show that just came out on HBO called The Gilded Age.
Okay.
It's fabulous. And it's talking about this guy named White, an architect that designed a house for this guy that called Russell, but it's really Vanderbilt. And it's McKim, Mead, and White.
Okay.
It's crazy. And that's one of my favorite architects. And they were turn of the century. This guy built this in the 1800s. And you look down the street and the patterns of all the row houses that with the brownstones and just the patterns of the openings of the windows, proportions. It was just fantastic.
Right.
And so why was that? Why is it so horrible now? And it was so beautiful then.
I love all the detail that you would see, crown molding and etches and, all that stuff used to exist and it just doesn't now. I think it's because it's too expensive to produce.
It's the patterns. It's not the embellishment.
I see.
Because, for instance, if you look at the row housing we did at Kettner Row, and that was built in 96.
Okay.
And except for the ones that they butchered, the building's still pretty. The building's still nice, and there's no detail on it. Mm-hmm. It's nominal, but it's refined and it's simple and it's elegant.
Right.
And that's what they had on all these other buildings, and they didn't necessarily have all the gilding that you're sort of referring to. Gilded Age, kind of ironic I said that, but it was just done right. There's a building downtown I call the Tutti Frutti building.
Okay.
It's on Beach, India, and cruises through to the street to the east. And they have like 7-foot doors on the storefront. Mm-hmm. And that's chasing the dollar because they were cramming one more level of building in the Type 5 building. And it's just horrible. Turn of the century, if you had something under 14 feet for the bottom floor, you'd be short.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah. Well, these days, like, where do you draw inspiration from? Because, like we've determined and talked about, like, you do have a particular design language or at least aesthetic language. Anything not related to architecture you pull from? Obviously, you're a huge car guy, which we'll get to.
Yeah, the automobile thing is pretty interesting. When we go into a project, I'm looking at the high rise over here, it was important to me to achieve certain ideas. So it isn't like, let's draw a whole bunch of plans and okay, that'll be great. No, I really want to have a building that has a smooth skin on one side that becomes a simple monolithic piece. So that was sort of the driving force of it. And then it evolves and it kind of goes out in the left field and that creates something. Then you kind of try to bring it back to center field with the smooth skin. Then it goes, you do some other things to it. And eventually you find out that the first idea you had is the right idea, but you had to go to 20 other ideas to come back to the first idea. So if you look at, architects, you asked about current architects. If you look at like Gordon Bunshaft, did some magic work back in the 40s and 50s and 60s for SOM. He did the Lever House. And so then that's, if you look at it over and over and over and over and over again, it becomes subliminal and it sort of comes through your brain, from your eyes, through your brain, to your hand, and then it goes into the projects. So there's definitely some just, what do you call that? Muscle reflex, muscle memory
Right.
that drops that out. But if you ask me, hey, you should start a real firm and have, 30 employees and do 30 projects a year, I couldn't do it. I can
Right.
do one building well a year. I can do two buildings almost as well a year. And past that, I just don't have the bandwidth. I don't know, the mental bandwidth or the design bandwidth or something.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how would you describe your managerial style then? Because obviously you do have to oversee your employees.
The monster office of me and Matthew with Rob that just showed up. And, well, I think you can't design in a democracy. Someone has to be the dictator making the final call. You can't politic around, well, I don't know if we like this or that, or it's going the wrong way, the right way. But there's a synergy that happens between me and Matthew where I've learned, to be passive. He says, I want to, do this and this. Okay, great, we'll do it. And then remember, we were trying to go down the center field and he drifts over to right field. And then he sees when he gets there, maybe not so much, but maybe what he did influences something else, which makes something else better.
Right.
But I'm not interested in doing 15 schemes on a project. We do something that we think's right and we do it. And it's efficient.
Sure. Is there any sort of common method and or order of operations, if you will, when it comes to your creative process that may be, say, unique to you or your business?
Well, what we don't have is we don't have the interface of the client. So if we're working on a project, we ask the questions and we answer them. I can't imagine doing a whole bunch of work, showing it to a client, having to do the rah-rah, the rah-rah pictures and the videos and all the other graphics that go with that waste of time.
You're a car guy, which I find to be interesting because cars are mechanical and buildings rarely are. I mean, other than like doors and things.
They're both handmade.
Both handmade.
Bespoke
Did you ever
ones
think
are.
you'd be a car designer?
No, not a chance. To be a real car designer, you have to have what I call the happy hand.
Okay.
Which is, the graphic ability. I can draw, I can do watercolors, but I can't. In architecture school, there's one or two guys or girls or whatever in every class that just has that ability to draw. That's
Right.
amazing. And that's what a car designer has.
Well, you're a big Porsche guy.
Yeah.
You drove the 73 RS in today.
Yep.
What is it about Porsche that attracts you to their brand primarily?
Well, I would say originally it was the 356, which I find one of the most beautiful forms of a car, and then they transformed the 356 into the 911, and then it kept going. And I think the car, for the value, is tremendous. Let's say it's 98% and a Ferrari's 100% as far as like performance. Who cares? I mean,
Right.
past 80%, it's all the same anyway. I'm not going 200 miles an hour on this road. And I just always loved the Porsche design. The Ferrari's a little, flamboyant. Lamborghini's a little flamboyant. Maserati's always sort of been not as good. And that's the newer cars. But going back to older cars, the Ferrari's the most beautiful for sure. There's no question about that.
Gotcha.
It's Italian design. Maserati's Italian design. Lamborghini, sort of. I had one of the first Lamborghinis ever made. They had awkward lights, but the design is beautiful.
Right.
The German stuff is so complicated. We have a 300 SL that we're doing a cosmetic restoration on right now. And it's brutal how complicated this thing is.
Are you going to the Concorde this year?
Well, Pebble Beach?
Pebble Beach, yeah.
Yeah, we're taking our Frua one-off Maserati Spider
Amazing.
this year. Yeah, so...
Well, but back to the RSs, are you more drawn to the 70s for any reason? Because it's the initial, like, versus say like a 997 RS or like a 4-liter RS that's like, iconic in its own right.
Hard to tell. I mean, the 60s and 70s had some pretty cool colors. That's why I'm drawn to that. I'm all over the board. I probably own 20 Porsches. I currently have a Carrera GT, which I find magic.
What color?
Basalt black.
Nice.
So it keeps pretty clean. Do I like the RS? Yeah, I like the RS. Do I love the RS? I love my 300 SL Roadster. I love my Carrera GT. I love my Lusso. I love my Maseratis. I love my Corvettes. Do I love the RS? Let me keep telling you. No.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's a 911 that has a souped up motor in it. And why is that 3 times the price of a 911? It isn't.
Right.
Is it magic and beautiful? It's kind of cool looking. Mine's chartreuse, one of 34 made. So I chased after that, just had the car restored. It's cool, it performs well. I'm more interested in beautiful things than performance-based
Right,
things.
the fastest thing. Right.
Yeah.
Didn't you have an orange one?
I had a signal yellow, which is
Signal yellow, yeah.
orange.
Yeah, it was just-
which
yeah.
is orange.
Yeah.
Signal yellow is orange. Signal red is tangerine.
Right.
And signal orange is yellow or whatever. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
But they got some cool colors.
Yeah.
And they're cool cars.
So 70s. I love it.
Yeah, little ducktail. Canepa has one of the original 8 for sale right now. The mule cars, as they call it.
Really?
Pretty cool looking. Has cowhide on the inside, which is crazy with the hair on it and stuff. And anyway,
How did the Ferrari Lusso come about? You got a 250 GT Lusso.
just always loved that car. That was my favorite car. So when we sold part of our portfolio in 2007, I think, 2008, I went and I purchased an Aston Martin DB9, which was at that point one of my favorite cars ever. Beautiful car.
Yeah.
Porsche purchased the Carrera GT, and then a Lusso I bought out of London because I've always coveted that.
All in 2009.
2008 maybe.
Well, I mean, it's good timing is my point.
Yeah. Well, the Lusso had just started to move. It moved from 200,000 to 400,000.
Yeah.
Like in a year. And then they sort of stopped and kind of calmed down a little bit.
Well, the Carrera GT, I mean.
Crashed that. That was smart. And then the Aston Martin had some defect and it was rattling forever. So they ended up taking that car back. But I had that Lusso. I was not informed that the engine was the incorrect engine. Joe Seifert, who was a famous Porsche racer.
Yeah.
He was probably the greatest guy that would race in the rain. Originally owned the car. So it was kind of cool, but it didn't have the proper motor on it. And a guy was going to pay me the big money, like $700,000 for that car without the proper motor. So I sold that. And then I always coveted getting another one. And I bought that one 2 years ago at Amelia Island, exactly 2 years.
I was going to ask where you got it.
Yeah, on an auction. And it's an all original car that's got a horrible red Earl Scheib repaint on it. So we're actually, by the end of this month, we'll have that stripped. And we'll be painting it the Grigio Fumo, which is smoke gray, metallic color.
Gorgeous.
Originally was. Smoking, such a cool car.
Absolutely. Who does your paint work?
We used to use Steve Beckman out of Orange County, and now it's SoCal Paint, and they did a fabulous job on 300 SL.
Oh, that's great. The 38 Lancia, special car.
Super special. Got it here.
Can you talk about its story?
Yeah, I got that car. So Paul Hagman is one of my close buddies that helps me get cars, and we talked about Pebble trying to invest in show eventually, and you typically need a pre-war car to do that, and a big car, an important car, and like a one-off.
Right.
And he found this. He found this Lancia Astura is what it's called, and Porto was the designer, which is a French guy. He was actually a dentist. That was the designer within the Porto company. So we purchased that car, and it got here, and it didn't have enough oil in it, and ate its engine. So drove that about 150 miles. That was that. No synchro mesh, kind of weird. Anyway, it's up in San Francisco getting the engine rebuilt right now.
Oh my goodness.
It's probably 2 or 3 years from Pebble. But the crazy thing is this year, 2022, we have a Maserati Zagato built car I've coveted my entire life. Finally had enough money to buy it, bought it. And we were runner-up to Best of Show.
Incredible. I mean, Zagato, what more can you say? What is it about Maserati that you like?
They made A6Gs. They made 62 of them, 61 of them in 1956. And that was my first restoration car. I had an Alemano that I bought out of London at an auction, and it got here and as a pile of junk. So we restored it, went to Pebble Beach, we won our class, and then I started collecting these cars. So I've had 4 of them. I currently have 3. The A6G model, that's the chassis model, then they had different designers on top.
Okay.
I bought the most important all original one out of Paris in 15, the Frua design, that was the Italian designer, and then bought the sister car of that one, which was a convertible, which is, I think, absolutely one of the most beautiful convertibles ever designed, ever.
Right.
Better than any Ferrari. That's going to Pebble this year.
Cool.
And that's Frua also. So I got the brother and the sister, and then I've got the Zagato. So it's just a niche that I've found that can distinguish me from other people, which is important, I think.
Yeah.
Like your art, you talk about the architecture and the language. Well, this has distinguished me for that.
Right.
So we have these cool 3 Frua cars. Really, well, I'm sorry, 3 A6G cars, 2 Frua, 1 Zagato.
So Spike Ferriston refers to it as the taproot car. Like, what started it all for you? Like, what got you into cars to begin with?
My dad had an MGA when we were growing up.
Cool.
And then I bought an MGA and had 4 of those.
Nice.
And they worked out well, and they were inexpensive, and they're great cars, and they're cool cars, and kind of like White Walls, which is kind of a 70s sort of black guy thing. And my dad had Cadillacs because he was from England, and that was the deal. When you came to the United States, you were established, you were somebody, you bought a Cadillac. You could never afford a new one. But in the 60s, that was the real deal. You would made it if you had a Cadillac.
See, I love the white walls of like a 58 Corvette or like the old XJ 140s or something like that.
White walls
or
are
XK,
beautiful.
excuse me, XK 140s.
Got white walls in the 300 SL.
That's great. Is there a car you'd never sell?
Well, I think every car is always for sale, but never sell. I hope I don't have to sell my Frua Spider, my Zagato car, and then my 356.
That's amazing.
That was the first car I ever bought, was the 356. Mice and Blue, 1959.
Amazing. You're no stranger to patterned pants.
Yeah.
What got you into fashion?
I don't know. I think it's just something innate, you either like or you don't like. Always kind of like clothes. Even like back in high school when I used to work, I used to spend my money on clothes. Trina Turk stuff is the stuff I like a lot.
Oh, really?
I have clothes made, but Trina Turk is out of Southern California and in Palm Springs.
I used to sell Trina Turk in Raleigh.
Seriously?
I did.
How'd you sell that?
Well, I managed a multi-brand boutique, and we carried that line, and it was like
Mr. Turk.
Yeah, I want to say it was right when they were releasing men's to start, but I can't remember how long she's done that.
Yeah. Well, her husband passed away. He was a photographer.
Right. I haven't been
Mr.
to the
Turk.
store in Palm Springs, but
Love that place.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, super cool. They did a nice job. She's really cool. Trina's really cool. We went to Leo Marmol's wedding, and it was out there, and then they were part of that because Marmol Radziner had restored her house. I think they call it the Ship.
Okay.
Super cool. It looks like an ocean liner kind of thing.
Yeah.
I got to meet her there, and then her husband. But does cool stuff and very slimming.
Yeah. There you go. Do you see yourself still working late into your life, kind of like Frank Lloyd Wright did, or do you think
that's a really good question right now. I mean, the stress level's pretty high. I'm 60, and it's really funny when you're 59. You're always thinking of the future, and you're 60, you start counting the days. It's kind of weird.
That happened to me at 39.
39. Well, you move on up to the 40s and 50s, you'll get it.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're invincible until you get to 60, and then at 60 you start going, well, if I mess up here and lose that there, that won't work out so well. So, yeah, I hope to. I hope to be working. The good news is I've got my cars.
Yeah.
Which we George and I are putting back the 300 SL, and I really enjoy that and enjoy the people I've met that do the restoration. We've got 2 fabulous guys up in Vancouver that are working on the 2 cars, Rob, Mike, and then their painter, Ian.
Cool.
And they educate me, so it's just a new adventure.
Right.
So architecture, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean, everything's in such disarray, and you have no idea where everything's going right now, but I really want to build the high-rise, and then we just went into escrow on a house on the ocean.
Right.
That I always coveted. So those are my last 2 real big dreams, and my big dreams may morph into something else later, but that's currently what I have.
So you're not worried about the cliffs?
No, we're way above the cliffs, and we're 40 feet back from the bluff edge and all the other goodies. But no,
Great.
It's just unbelievable. Well, I grew up in Manhattan Beach, right?
Yeah.
Always loved the ocean.
Sure. Of course.
And La Jolla's pretty. I think the best place in San Diego is Coronado.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like Mayberry RFD. Everything's beautiful. Everybody's taking care of everything.
It's
Everybody
like
cares.
the Truman Show.
It's like the Truman Show, yeah.
That's what I
but
always
better.
call it.
Only better, yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Speaking of Manhattan Beach, are you tight with Matt Jacobson?
I know Matt.
Yeah.
I knew Matt. Let's put it this way.
Car guy, lives in a special house.
Yeah, he's a VW guy.
Oh, yeah.
Strangely enough.
Yeah.
A watch guy.
Yep. I was going to ask you, are you into watches?
A little bit. I've got Panerais, probably 7 or 8 Panerais, and I've got Vacheron, which is the rotated watch. Am I an expert on watches? No. I just like what I like, right? I'm not like I'm into cars, and I understand that. The watches, I don't so much. But
oh, interesting.
And Matt has a lot in our house, I think.
I believe you're right.
Manhattan Beach. No, I haven't. I haven't seen that. Have you been there?
I haven't been to his house, no. But I used to work for James Purse in Malibu and met Matt back then, but he probably has no idea who I am.
Yeah. Well, he remembers me sort of because I have a haberdasher, my friend Ian, up in L.A. knows him.
Okay.
So that's interesting because he was a friend of mine in high school.
Oh,
played
funny.
Tennis. He played tennis. I didn't play tennis.
Right.
I lived on 12th Street next to Uncle Bill's.
Oh, nice.
Pancake house.
Oh,
yeah.
hell yeah. I love Uncle Bill's.
Yeah. Well, that was then, and it's kind of crazy because I was watching the Davis documentary yesterday.
Yeah,
and
sure.
They were talking about Santana. I got a little Santana story. So when I was
The guitarist.
yeah,
Santana. Yeah.
yeah, Carlos Santana.
Musician. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was walking down 12th Street to go to the ocean. I don't know, 8th grade.
Yeah.
And there was a limo there, and the limo driver standing outside, and I said, "What's going on?" I was, "Who's that? Who's that?" "Oh, do you know who Carlos Santana is, man?" I said, "No, I have no idea who that is." Boom, he popped out, said hi, shake my hand. He says, "Give me $1." So the guy gives him a $1 bill. He signs it, Carlos Santana. Do I have that? No, someone lost it, but that's a cool story.
Oh, no.
Yeah, very cool story.
So, I see a set of golf clubs in the corner.
Yeah.
Are you getting out?
Unfortunately, I get out just enough to love it and hate it. So.
Well, we'll have to play sometime.
I break 100.
That's great.
Yeah.
If you don't play,
I unfortunately can hit a ball pretty well.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you never play, it's like, but we're always like a victim of our own expectations anyway.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. No, I like playing with good guys like you.
Yeah,
it's always fun to watch.
I'm always looking for people to play with because all of my friends who play are all over the country. They don't live in San Diego. So.
Okay.
Well, just wrapping up here, is there anything else you want to talk about or promote? What you got in the works?
I think I want to make just a global statement about this housing crisis we're having. And it's pretty simple. And I don't know why they don't understand, they being the municipalities or what have you. It's a supply-demand thing. It's basic economics. It's like, freshman year, Econ 101. If I have 100 cups of coffee and there's 500 people that want it, guess what?
Price is going up.
Price is going up. If I have 1,000 cups of coffee that are hot and there's 500 people that want it, guess what?
That's right.
Price is going down.
Yep.
And I'm going to have to unload some real cheap. So let me make a whole bunch of coffee. Don't tell me that I have to file 15 permits to go get the beans, and then grind the beans is another permit, and then to get the water is another permit, and the cups another permit. Just let me go to the store, get my cups of coffee, make coffee, and everybody's all fired up. The city can't get that. They don't understand that. They want to have a committee to talk about the committee, to see what that other committee's doing. And it's never going to change unless they get their shit together and just say, go build.
Yeah.
For a year. Build anywhere you want. Build anything you want. That's what I say. I don't care if it's commercial zone, residential zone, any zone. Let me build housing. And that's not happening. So it's fun.
Jonathan, thanks for the time.
You're welcome.
Hey guys, Wesley here. If you liked what you heard, maybe tell a friend about the Standard H podcast. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show as it helps others discover this podcast. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track, as well as to Clear Audio for the noise canceling headphones. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.